name is Preston McCall. This channel is about my being a painter, an artist painter. 70 years of exploring this career has taught me some interesting tales that I will try to convey. It has been a fabulous adventure. I am an artist, a painter, been painting all of my life. My mother was an artist and encouraged me to draw as a child. I went to art school at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas in the late 60s. It was a time of tremendous upheaval in America. The Vietnam War was raging. The hippie movement was in full bloom. It was just a crazy, crazy time. America was just a wild place. Anyway, I hope you enjoy these, and look forward to seeing more of you and hearing back from you. So please subscribe and look forward for more. Thank you. Okay, I went to the Wichita Art Association when I was about 12 years old. My mother put me in a life drawing class. I thought we were going to go out and draw pictures of cows and horses. And I get to the first class, and everybody in it's like over 30 old people. I'm like 12. And so I could sit on the front row and a bunch of drawing easels, and with my new kneaded eraser and my charcoal sticks and my newsprint. And out walks this woman wearing a kimono and gets up on the model stand and drops her kimono. And I'm like 12 years old. And everybody in the class just broke out laughing. And I had no idea it was a nude model situation. So here I am at 12, and I'm thinking, yeah, I like this. This is working out just fine. So that was my first real exposure to drawing. And I was so embarrassed I had to learn how to draw fast. And I did. And I continued to take classes in high school, and then finally I went to art school at KU. And then I got out with a BFA, and I discovered that, you know, there weren't any jobs being offered for us who had BFAs. So I scratched my head, and I knew how to draw, so I went to architecture school and applied myself, worked hard. But it was, I hated it. It was just boring. And at the same time, I bought a house, had a wild redheaded girlfriend, and secured a one-man show back in Wichita at another gallery. And so I was real busy. And I was also working part-time at the Chrysler dealer, detailing cars. So I quit my job and opened my first shop. And in a year we had like 12 or 15 guys working for us, and we were detailing cars and doing minor body work and beginning to restore antique cars, which was really a lot of fun. So anyway, I had a source of income, and I was continuing to paint. I moved into a grocery store house, which was like a little neighborhood grocery store, and it was great. And it was just a couple blocks from the shop, and it had an apartment upstairs that I rented out, which just about made the house payment. So it was a wonderful deal, and I had a great studio there. So I continued to work there. So now let me stop, and I'll show you some more paintings. Thanks. Okay, I had this great shop. I lived in this grocery store. But I'd gone to art school with a friend of mine who went off to Chicago and learned how to become a sign painter. And he came back, and his parents lived in Lawrence, where my shop was, and he wanted to open a sign company. So I had a building behind my shop that was perfect. And so I leased it, and we started Star Signs Graphics. And immediately went out and started trying to sell signs. My partner in crime in that business was hardworking and very talented. And in no time at all, I began to learn how to hand letter, which was like learning how to draw again. It was a very, very difficult challenge. And I spent a lot of time learning how to hand letter. This was back before computers, so signs were all painted by hand with patterns and opaque projectors and complicated process. But we moved it along. I still had my shop, and then after a couple of years, we broke up. He moved the shop out into a much bigger operation out south of town, and then I moved my shop up north into a much bigger building, and we're focusing on restoring old cars mostly. And it was a much, much bigger shop. I had to build a giant paint booth and all kinds of other equipment in there. And so from that point, which was about 1982 and 1983 until about 1987, I ran the shop and I continued to paint. So that was the process of the big shop. But I grew tired of it. It was demanding, and I had an opportunity to go run a Chevy store. I knew some people that had a Chevy store that was out in Junction City, Kansas, about 100 miles west of Lawrence. So I sold out and moved to Junction City, Kansas. Okay, I'm in Junction City, Kansas. I'm running a Chevy store. I have a whole bunch of employees and a bunch of responsibilities, and I'm working absurd hours every week. And I'm living in this little apartment, and I'm still trying to produce some artwork. I go out into the Flint Hills, which surrounds Junction City, beautiful country, and do some pastel drawings, but basically ignored my artwork for 2.5, 3 years I was out there. And I felt very awkward about it. I really wanted to get back to my painting. So I quit, and I moved back to Lawrence, and then eventually within the next year moved to Kansas City, where I finally got married for the first time to Margie, and I was married to her for 15 years. At that point I started painting a lot more. I was beginning to do more landscapes. I had studied under a landscape painter, Bob Sudlow, at KU, and had always enjoyed doing landscapes. And once I really kind of played with him, I began to produce some fairly interesting landscapes to the point that it intrigued me. So for the next 5 years, I was back in Kansas. I was in Kansas City, back in Lawrence, and then on to Kansas City, and really began to pour myself into my painting a lot more. It was something I felt very deeply inside was important, and I was very glad I did it. Okay, so I'm back in Kansas City, and I'm thinking, I don't want to go back in the car business, and I don't want to go in the sign business. I don't want to go back into the body shop business. And I drove out to LA. And I saw almost every car dealership and a lot of fast food restaurants were painting their windows in fluorescent paint. And I began to talk to some people that did it and figured out in no time at all that, maybe I should come back to Kansas City and do that. So I came back and called myself a splash artist. That's window splash painting. And it was real bright fluorescent painting on windows, and I started doing that. And in no time, Taco Bell contacted me, and then Wendy's and Hardee's and McDonald's and Pizza Hut and all the rest of the chains. And I had just a mountain of work, and it paid very well. And of course, we'd have rainy days and days that was too cold, so I could spend more time in the studio. And since I was happily married, and we had a nice, comfortable house, and I had a great studio, I was able to spend a lot more time painting. And it was a very enjoyable time for the next few years, finally until about 1999. And then I decided, well, I've got a pretty good body of work. How about if I go to New York and try to find a gallery that wants to give me a one-man show? That sounds like a great idea. So I jumped in the car and drove to New York City, where my sister lived about 40 miles east on Long Island, stayed with her and went into the city every day. And in about a week's time, I went and talked to 85 different galleries, trying to find somebody that was interested in giving me a one-man show. Finally, after 85 galleries, I connected with the gallery, Atelier International Art Group, on Broadway and Soho, and we scheduled a one-man show of my narrative paintings and some of my landscapes. I was amazed. Came home, wrapped up most of the work, got it all framed, delivered it all back to New York, had the one-man show, sold some work, had a lot of people show up. It was a wonderful experience, and suddenly I felt like, well, I can do that. I can paint and enjoy my life immensely, considering I've got this great source of side income. And the window painting was fun, and it was creative. I had to tackle a bunch of different types of painting, different drawing and skills that were very directly related to my art school. So the window painting really helped out. My father every day used to go out with tempera paint and paint on his windshields on his used car lot. And I saw that when I was a kid, and I was very impressed with it, but I never could do it. But then I went through the sign business and figured out how to hand letters, so I started lettering windshields. I have painted 185,000 windshields in my career in the last 32 years. So windshield painting was great. I could do about 26 of them an hour. They paid well. I had good repeat customers, and I enjoyed that immensely. And that brings me up to about 2014. So let me back up a second. Back in 2001, after 9/11, I had the fundamental belief that since I had seen what the show was like in New York, and I tried to get my work into other galleries, and I had been to Santa Fe many times and saw all the fun galleries in Santa Fe, maybe 200 of them. And I wanted to show down there, and I had taken a lot of work down there and showed it at various different galleries, and but not much was selling. So I decided to really jump in deep. And I leased a space right downtown in Santa Fe on San Francisco Street. And we started with my wife Margie the art gallery Paxton and McCall Fine Art. And we carried 26 artists, but primarily focused on my work. And in the course of 2.5 years, I sold about 350 of my paintings. And I realized that, yeah, it's a matter of representing them correctly, meeting the people who are going to buy them, and working hard at running a gallery, which is a 7-day-a-week full-time job. And so I was going back and forth between Santa Fe and Kansas City 38 times a year, driving 760 miles. And it was hell. But I still had enough sign business, window painting business back in Kansas City that I had to come back about every 3 weeks and work here for about a week. I had a full-time director and several staff that ran the gallery, and they were able to manage it in my absence, and then I would go back down there and run it, and then I had a studio in the back. I did that for 2.5, 3 years, and in early 2003, my wife Margie was totally against the idea. A long story, but basically she was had a great job working as a marketing director for a law firm, and just did not want to participate, like we talked about to begin with, in helping run the gallery. So I sold off the assets and came back to Kansas City. And fortunately, I walked right back into a ton of window painting work. And so I continued painting windows. And in 2005, Margie and I went to Europe for an extended time, had a wonderful trip, got to see all the art I wanted to see in London and Paris and Italy, Firenze, Pisa. Really got to see a great deal of what I wanted to see. We flew home and decided that we needed to separate, which was a big shock to me. And so we did. And over the next year, we got divorced, and she moved away, and I continued to live in this wonderful home we had, which had a great studio. And I started dating and meeting other women, and after 2.5 years, I met this wonderful woman named Susie, who's also an artist. And we hit it off immediately and would sit by the fireplace and have long conversations about art every day, and it was just wonderful. And I produced a lot of work, and she produced a lot of work, and I continued to paint windshields and paint windows and do the rest of the creative stuff I was doing. But finally, in 2014, we decided, you know, let's go back to Santa Fe and have another gallery. And she was much more committed to it than my previous wife had been. So, in 2014, Susie and I moved everything to Santa Fe. We sold our homes, and we set up a beautiful gallery on Canyon Road. It was really an experience that it cannot be rivaled with anything. Santa Fe is just this beautiful mountain town, 7,500 feet elevation, high desert, a great number of artists in Santa Fe, and it's just this beautiful, wonderful environment. It was 7 days a week, and it was very expensive to operate the gallery, but we began to sell a lot of work, and we finally moved it closer down to the front, to the beginning of Canyon Road after 2 years, and really hit our stride and sold significant amount of work. My work, her work, and a lot of sculpture from Native American artists that I'd gotten to know and really cared for a great deal. But after another 2 years of that, we've been down there 4 years, and it was very tiring, 7 days a week. So we decided to give up the space and not renew the lease, and we moved back to Kansas City, is where we are now. So, ongoing. Well, that's a brief rundown of what I've done over all these years to support my art habit. I'm going to go into more detail with some of the stories and certainly some of the people I met. And I'm going to talk about the 3 different types of painting I do. I paint narrative paintings, which are figurative, kind of surreal story paintings. I paint basic landscapes, but I also paint photo real automobiles. These are like portraits of interesting vintage cars that I've loved, cherished over the years. So I'm going to show some of those, and I'm going to show all my paintings that are significant and try to talk to you about them, and maybe hopefully you can understand a little bit more about what I'm about. I appreciate you watching all of this, and we'll look forward to additional connections with this. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Oh, one last thing. Go to McCallFineArt.com. You'll see a whole bunch of our work, my work, a lot of the artists we carry, and there's a lot of video there as well. So, McCall Fine Art. Thanks for watching.